an aeronautics expert who specializes in airplane crash, investigate a plane that crashed and killed 300 passengers. With the help of a black box that is a crash-proofed recording device and is always placed in the cockpit of a plane, it records the last moments before a crash and gives investigators an idea of what might have caused it. With this, the investigator discovers several layers of conspiracies, which eventually exposes the dark side of an airline company. Hey guys, welcome back to IM Movies. Today we're looking into the 2021 French mystery thriller film, titled Black Box. But before we jump into the details, make sure to show us some love by liking the video and subscribing to the channel. Now let's get right into it. The movie begins as passengers of a European airline plane called Aeronautics 800, flying from Paris to Dubai, are instructed to sit and fasten their seatbelt as they experience turbulence. However, moments after this announcement, the plane experiences a descent which eventually results in a crash. Following this crash, we meet Mathieu Vasseur, a black box expert who works for the BIA, an aviation safety investigation agency. Mathieu is known for his exceptional hearing abilities, which makes him one of the best in his field. However, due to his meticulous nature, he often finds himself in disagreement with his superiors. Soon, the news of the Aeronautics 800 crash reaches the agency, revealing that all 300 passengers and 16 crew members are now dead. However, Mathieu soon finds himself sidelined for the investigation, following a recent disagreement with Victor Pollock, a BEA senior analyst. Instead, Pollock picks Mathieu's colleague Balsan for the investigation, even though Mathieu has been his favorite partner for a long time. Shortly after this, Balsan requests that Mathieu hands over the investigation box to him, as he prepares to set out with Pollock. As Mathieu goes to get the box from his car, he gets on a call with his wife, telling her how he was sidelined for the investigation. On his way back, he accidentally scratches Pollock's car with the box, leaving a dent on it. However, Mathieu soon realizes that the incident has been captured on the car's dash cam. Later that evening, Mathieu attends a party with his wife Naomi, who works as an agent at the aircraft regulatory body, ASSA. Here, Mathieu meets with his old friend Xavier Renault, the CEO of Pegasus Security, a firm that develops onboard communication systems for aircraft. Xavier's company happens to have developed the communication system of the crashed Aeronautics 800. On the way home, Mathieu and Naomi begin to discuss the crashed Aeronautics 800 and the possible reasons behind the incident. During the discussion, Mathieu asks his wife if she thinks it's a technical issue, and she replies to him saying that her agency did their certification job well. Later that night, Pollock and his team successfully retrieve the black box from the crash site, and they soon begin the investigation process. Meanwhile, Mathieu watches from his office as they finally open the box to retrieve the cockpit voice recorder, or CVR. After carefully removing and downloading the audio file, Pollock and Balsan begin to work on it, carefully listening to the recording and writing down their findings. The next morning, after conducting a test flight with a pilot named Mr. Roussin, Mathieu receives an urgent call from his boss, Philippe Renier, the chief director at BEA. Renier tells Mathieu that Pollock is currently nowhere to be found, stating that he needs him to urgently assist Balsan with analyzing the CVR. Renier also reveals that there is a press conference slated for 7 p.m., and he needs to have something to tell the press. Mathieu immediately gets down to work, and with his acute sense of hearing, he can deduce that the pilots were in communication with air traffic control, followed by a flight attendant's visit to the cockpit, who had gone there to take the pilot's food order. When the flight attendant returned to give their food, Mathieu hears additional footsteps approaching the cockpit, which is then followed by panic noises right before the crash. As Mathieu continues to filter the noises from the CVR, he hears a man shout Allahu Akbar in the background, just before the plane crash. With this, Mathieu concludes that an intruder must have entered the cockpit to attack the pilot. So during the press conference, Mathieu reveals that the stranger must have entered the cockpit as the flight attendant returned to deliver the pilot's food. However, Renier later adds that they do not have enough evidence yet to support this claim. After the press conference, a journalist named Caroline Delmas approaches Mathieu for more questions, but he turns down her request. The next day, news of a supposed intruder who is believed to be an Egyptian extremist fills all media outlets following Mathieu's CVR analysis. Later, Renier thanks Mathieu for his hard work and immediately appoints him as the new head of investigation following Pollock's disappearance. Shortly after Mathieu's appointment, he learns about a voice recording from a man whose wife was a victim of the Aeronautics 800 plane crash. Mathieu immediately goes to meet the man, who then gives him a voicemail recording he'd received from his wife moments before the crash. While examining the voicemail, Mathieu discovers a time difference of 3 minutes, which shows that the message might not be from the plane. Although Renier believes it's a minor time error, Mathieu still suspects something suspicious and determines to get to the root of the case. Later, Mathieu attends another ceremony with his wife, who then introduces him to the CEO of Atrian, Claude Varin. Shortly after, Chief Director of ASA, Dorval announces the departure of Naomi from the organization, revealing that she's now going to take on a senior position at Atrian. At the same time, Mathieu leaves the place and enters into a hangar where the remnant of the Aeronautics 800 has been kept. Following Matthew's investigation, he goes through the passenger list and the Facebook photos they took inside the plane. He once again listens to the CVR, and at the same time visualizes himself being in the plane. However, at this time, the Egyptian intruder proves to be innocent and Matthew's curiosity intensifies as he begins to feel there's something wrong with the CVR. The next day, Matthew asks Balsan if he noticed any strange thing the first day he analyzed the CVR with Pollock. Balsan reveals to him that he had to leave at some point, adding that Pollock continued the analysis alone till midnight. Following this, Matthew decides to investigate Pollock's office for clues that could help him resolve the issue. Luckily, Matthew discovers Pollock's home address and computer password. With this, Matthew drives to the address, and after finding it empty, decides to break in. Once inside the house, Matthew locates Pollock's laptop and immediately logs in but finds it empty. Following this, Matthew decides to leave. On his way out, he spots Pollock's car in the garage and recalls noticing the dashcam a few days earlier. Shortly after, Matthew finds the keys to the car and then retrieves the memory card of the dashcam. However, as Matthew begins to review the videos on the memory card, he gets startled by a dog that is being held by an elderly man. Matthew introduces himself to the man as Pollock's co-worker and proceeds to ask about his whereabouts. The man reveals that he hasn't seen Pollock for a while, and Matthew leaves afterward. Back at home, Matthew continues to review the dashcam footage and he soon discovers a disturbing part of the footage, where Pollock is seen standing alone in front of his car on the 10th of October. This weird behavior pricks Matthew's curiosity, and he decides to recheck the videos going back in time. The footage on the 30th of September reveals Pollock meeting with Xavier, the CEO of Pegasus Security. With this, Matthew begins to wonder what could have led to this odd meeting. The next day, while driving to work, Matthew notices a Mercedes-Benz car trailing him. However, his suspicion soon appears to be false as the car drives past him. Later that day, Matthew begins to dig into Xavier, but can't find anything that connects him to Pollock. Later, Samir Jalab, a BEA junior staff, brings Matthew reports of a control surface problem that has been repeatedly documented on the Atrion 800 for the last 3 months. Matthew sees this as the potential cause and soon begins to investigate it, asking Samir to look into any potential error with the plane's MHD generator. The next day, Matthew meets with Mr. Roussin, who reveals to him that the Atrion 800 plane was marketed too soon, because Claude Varan, the CEO of Atrion, was trying to meet up with his competitors. Mr. Roussin further adds that the company had turned a blind eye to the plane's autopilot systems before launching it. Later that day, Matthew picks up Naomi from the airport and soon begins to ask her what she knows about the control surface problem that Atrion's planes have been having. However, Naomi assures him that she's sure that the airplane passed certification and that the agency will never approve a faulty plane. Following this, Matthew reveals his intention to test the MHD system to Renier. However, Renier tells him that he'll need to bring evidence to support his claims before he can grant him access. Afterward, Matthew reaches out to Mr. Roussin for clues on how to get evidence, but he gets turned down. Later, Xavier, who is now aware of Matthew's investigation into the MHD system, meets with Matthew and tries to convince him that the Atrion 800 was in perfect condition. Xavier further adds that Matthew shouldn't jeopardize his wife's new job with his curiosity, because it's a sensitive job. However, Matthew shows Xavier the footage of him meeting Pollock, and then asks him how he managed to know Pollock since he never introduced them. Xavier calmly claims he met Pollock while they were working on a distress beacon project together. Afterward, Xavier begins to question Matthew's sanity, stating that Matthew needs to relax because he has been getting himself worked up lately. Shortly after that, Matthew begins to experience discomfort as loud noises fill his ears, prompting him to leave. Later that night, Matthew manages to snoop into Naomi's laptop to copy confidential data about Atrion 800 to his flash drive. The next day, Matthew presents the data to Renier, who then promises to grant him access to investigate the MHD. However, Atrion learns about the data leak, and as soon as they realize it came from Naomi, she gets fired. Later that night, Naomi confronts Matthew about the leak and he apologizes to her, stating that he never expected that the data would be made public. Regardless, Naomi refuses to listen to his explanations, and they begin to argue. Soon, Matthew later flares up in frustration, stating that Naomi must have known that the Atrion 800 plane was not ready before it got certified. However, Naomi tells him that he only cares about his crazy ideas as she angrily walks out. Afterward, Matthew goes to his office to cool off, but he soon spots the same Mercedes-Benz trailing him. This time, he decides to open the car and see who it is, but he finds the driver's seat empty, and also sees Pollock dead in the back seat. However, Matthew appears to have been dreaming as Samir wakes him up to join them for the MHD testing. Soon they begin to test the system for errors, but they can't find any. After several failed attempts to spot an error, Matthew gets frustrated and angrily walks into the CVR room to listen to the recordings for clues but can't find any. At this point, Matthew feels more frustrated, and he angrily slams the computers. The next day, Matthew decides to spend some time at his sister's place to cool off, while he waits for the DEA's preliminary hearing. Later, Matthew takes his nephew Theo to the park to play with his drone. While watching Theo play with the drone, Matthew watches as a group of teenagers hack the drone's control system and remotely take control of it. With this, Matthew realizes that Atrion 800 must have been hacked rather than having an error in its system. With this, Matthew visits Xavier and asks him if it is possible that the Atrion 800 was hacked. However, Xavier tells him that Pegasus' security system is tight and that there's no way anyone could have hacked it. After this, Matthew meets with Caroline, his journalist friend, revealing to her that he believes Xavier must have ignored a security flaw while writing the codes for the autopilot system. On hearing this, Caroline tells Matthew that there is no way they can prove this because there is no evidence. However, she reveals to him that there has been a plane hacking case where the hacker was later arrested upon landing in Warsaw. With this, she reveals the name of the hacker to be David Keller, who happens to be a former employee at Pegasus Security. It appears that David had vanished after he was fired from Pegasus Security 3 months earlier. As Matthew digs into the Facebook photos he discovers David was one of the 300 passengers who boarded the Atrion 800 flight. However, while looking through the list of passengers, Matthew realizes that David's name has been removed, proving that someone must have known about his presence. At this point, Matthew theorizes that David must have hacked the system to prove its vulnerability, but instead, he found himself logged out by the MHD system, which couldn't handle contradictory orders. With this evidence, Matthew tries to ask Naomi for help, but she refuses to listen to him because at this point, she doesn't seem to want anything to do with him. The next day, Renier gets Matthew transferred to another branch. However, while packing his things, Balsan approaches Matthew and requests access to the case file of a helicopter crash he was working on with Pollock before the Atrion 800 crashed. As Matthew attempts to send the file, he realizes that the file had been modified on the 11th of October, but Matthew only remembers saving the file on the 8th of October, since only 2 of them had access to the file. To add to the mystery, Pollock had gone missing on the 11th, and Matthew quickly realizes that Pollock must have left him a clue to work on. Matthew decides to listen to the CVR from the helicopter crash one more time, and after tweaking the sound, he finally hears a series of numbers being called out. The numbers happen to be coordinates that lead to a point. As soon as Matthew realizes this, he immediately gets on his way, carefully following the direction to the point. After driving for a while, the directions lead Matthew right inside Pollock's property and then to a lake nearby. Meanwhile, Naomi meets with Xavier, and while talking about the Atrion 800, Xavier remarks on the pilots not having their phones on before the crash. This statement piques Naomi's curiosity because there is no way Xavier would have known that. With this, Naomi calls Matthew and requests to see him urgently at the house. Using a boat nearby to follow the directions, Matthew manages to get to the exact coordinates. Soon he jumps into the water and frantically searches for the hidden evidence. After a while, Matthew discovers a beeping device, and inside it, he sees the CVR that was originally on the Atrion 800, alongside other evidence. After analyzing the CVR, Matthew realizes the pilots actually lost control of the airplane after David hacked the system, realizing that David must have also lost control after the MHD system took over, since his initial intention was to change the flight routes. Alongside the CVR, Pollock had also left a confession video where he reveals that he didn't take Matthew to the Atrion 800 investigation, because he knows he would have figured it out almost immediately. Pollock then reveals that Xavier had bribed him a few years ago to obtain advance information for his Atrion airplanes. However, Xavier didn't stop there, as he had forced Pollock to tweak the Atrion 800 CVR to make it look like a terrorist had attacked the plane. Shortly after watching the video, Matthew hears footsteps approaching and quickly turns off the lights to find a perfect hiding spot. At this point, Matthew is not sure if he'll leave there alive, so he decides to transfer the files to his wife. After confirming that they had been successfully sent, Matthew manages to escape by diverting the assassin's attention, playing a recording on Pollock's workstation speaker. With this, Matthew manages to get into his car, and soon begins to drive home. However, it appears that the assassins had installed an override system into Matthew's car, which means they can now control it remotely. After struggling to regain control of his car, Matthew eventually crashes to his death at high speed. Days after Matthew's death, a devastated Naomi, who appears to be mourning, attends the release event of Pegasus' new AI technology. However, as Xavier gives his speech, Pollock's confession video gets sent to everyone's phone, and it is also displayed in the screen for everyone to see. Following this, Xavier gets arrested on the spot, and all his evil deed gets exposed for the whole world to see. As Naomi walks away feeling frustrated for not believing her husband, she still feels satisfied, knowing that Matthew wanted to have justice behind this tragic crash that caused hundreds of innocent lives. And this is where our story ends. If you'd like to see us recap any other movies or topics you have in mind, just drop a comment and let us know. And don't forget to hit the like button, share this recap, and subscribe to stay updated for the next one. Until next time.